Hey, and welcome to the Do Good Work podcast. Today I'm talking to Ryan Tansom. Ryan is the co-founder of Arcona. And after turning around and selling his family business for 8 figures in 2014, Ryan devoted his life's work to helping entrepreneurs get clarity on how to grow the value of their business so that they can create wealth, enjoy work more, and have an impact. And he's on a mission to help business owners who feel trapped inside their business turn their operations around so that they can create the wealth and enjoy the work that they do and leave the legacy with the freedom and choice to do what they want.
Ryan, thanks for being on, man.
I'm excited to be here, man. Looking forward to it.
I think there was something interesting that you were talking about when we were doing the pre-show. And let's talk about owners wanting to know, but maybe also not wanting to know their true company valuation. It's like, hey, how much is this thing actually worth? If you want to know, but they're like, well, what if I don't like the number? It's almost
Yeah.
like that. There's a precipice there. You tell me a little bit more about like your experience working with founders in that phase in their journey, and what does that phase look like, and how do we arrive there?
How many people do you think like jumping on a scale?
Depends on your goals, man. Are you trying to
Exactly.
get
Yeah.
It's a good
Yeah,
way to put it.
again, it's the scale in the mirror, man. Do we know or do we not want to know? And what are we going to do about it? Because if you knowing puts cognitive dissonance and like, hey, like I now have a gap of where I'm at to where I want to go. The challenge is so few people actually understand what creates and actually makes a valuable company. So they don't
Mhm.
ever know how to figure out point A to even identify point B. I'll unpack your question a little bit further with some concepts, Raul, is that there's this concept of what we call like lifestyle business. People have been talking about that forever, but we've got a specific term or like some definition behind it, and it is solving for annual income. So like how much money can I pull out of this company through distribution, salary, and perks every year? And that's literally just every year. That's what they're focused on versus saying, what is my cash flow and how do I reinvest this cash flow to grow a more valuable asset? And then have
Mm.
choices with that asset. Totally different mindsets. There is no wrong mindset in my mind. It is just what is your goal and then orient your expectations around that. What happens is most people go, I suck all the cash out of this company. And why wouldn't it be worth $10 million? Because you haven't invested into anything that makes it sustainable, transferable, and predictable cash
Yeah.
flow. So like it's the out of whack expectations that really, I think, get people because they're just looking at top line revenue, net income, and how much cash comes out of it. And they don't understand even where they're at on that scale today and what they can be doing to go towards their goals.
Oh, yeah. Just a few notes on that. I'll do a follow-up question, but like I was looking at micro acquired companies just to see, hey, what's on the market right now? Hey, this company's doing so well, but then they're asking for so little, like the revenue, top line revenue, but that means that, oh, they must be sucking too much money out of the business, or it's like such a low cash flow. I'm curious to know, like, when the type of entrepreneurship business that you work with, what's like the demographic, like the business size, the team size, the industry?
So privately held companies,
Yep.
that's who we're working with. So not people looking to raise their A round, B round, C round from VC. It's not private equity backed because they've already got built into their strategy. This is an asset. I'm going to do something with it.
Yeah.
So privately held, couple $1 million in revenue. And there's two ways to answer because we have a training business and we have a fractional CFO business. On the
Yeah.
training, it's anybody that wants to understand how this works. So I've had people with a couple $100,000 in revenue or just about to start a business and do it right from the very beginning. Go
Smart.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the CFO services, it's a little bit different because of just the investment that they're going to need. But between a couple hundred or a couple of million revenue and the largest person that's been through a training is a couple 100 million. But I'd say sweet spot between 5 million in revenue and 50.
Yeah.
Just the traditional up and down the street, privately held businesses.
Yeah, the bootstrap, I love it, man. I think, but the mindset can be at any level, like you just alluded to, and I think that's important to look at. And I think this is important in factors, and I kind of want to dive into these factors with you. But like I was like, I'm pretty sure you read Dalio as well. Like you look at cash
Changing
flow, or
world
you,
order, man, right there. I love
oh
it.
yeah, they gotta reread that during these times. But essentially, he classifies it pretty bluntly. It's like the working class are those who work for cash flow, or the capitalists who actually build a cash machine
hmm
to be able to invest in it and get a return on it and make the money work for you. And I
hmm
think that is a mindset because in business, what's the end goal, like, the beginning goal what people have? Usually the entrepreneurs that I work with or the entrepreneurs that we develop or that I help grow are, I want to make more money, or I want to create this craft, or I want to deliver my skill set to the
hmm
marketplace at scale, or I want to be better known for what I do. because they might be exceptional in that
Hmm.
field or in their particular niche. So I think that's, if we go with those intentions first, building this because I'm either world class and it's cool to work with world class people,
Hmm.
and I want to also get handsomely paid for it. How do you allow the thinking to go, okay, cool, that's great. Your high number salary might not cut it if you actually want to build. What does the end game look like? How do you guide people to make that decision? Because there are some frameworks out there, but I'm just curious to know, how do you guide people to assess which path to take?
So I would say one is that it's very interesting. You talk about what do entrepreneurs want that we're both talking to on the in the audience here. We went through the Donald Miller story brand framework a couple years ago for our company. And honestly, when we talk about the character, what do they want? And it's just you and me. It's all entrepreneurs, man. I don't care like what you look like. We're all people. We do these crazy, insane things for a reason. And we boiled it down to three things. And it's like almost think about it like a Venn diagram with these three in the inside the middle. It's create wealth, enjoy work, and make an impact.
Mhm.
And they all have to you have to live in the middle of those because on over 300 episodes of my podcast I've done, I've had people worth so much money or all, and like they're so miserable
Yeah.
because they had made a lot of money, they were having fun, but then at some point they wake up and go, "What's this all for?" Because they're
Mhm.
human. Or you could be making a big impact, having a lot of fun, and you're broke as heck, and you're going, "I need to get paid at some point." So like I just see that like that was a common theme. And then the business becomes the most amazing vehicle to accomplish
Mhm.
your dreams in America. And like you have the ability to scale and
Yeah.
whatever is your own possibility. And so to get to the right frame of mindset, like you had said, it's well, we've got this training program, the 5 principles. We don't have to unpack them too much, but it's this mindset. And I'll just give you an example is shifting your mindset away from solving for annual income and top line revenue
Mhm.
to I have an asset that I want to grow.
Yeah.
And underneath that is another concept of ownership versus your management role. So like
Mhm.
you have to say like, well, like you have a job, you get a W-2 paycheck for the job that you're doing in your business.
Yep.
Private equity proves that you do not need to have a job at things you own. So you don't I don't I have Apple stock. I don't work at the Genius Bar, man. So you can have the same thing with your privately held company. So if you split your ownership versus your management role, that
Mhm.
gets us to the question that you asked or to like how do we answer this, which is if this business is generating $1 million in cash flow,
Yep.
call it EBITDA or whatever. We don't have to get into too much technical stuff, but if you have $1 million in cash flow, I'm in Minnesota. So like you and I were talking about, you're going to pay about 350 grand in taxes.
Yep.
How much are you expecting in distributions for your personal take home? So again, if you got 650 left, let's say you take another chunk out, and you say, I got a $500,000,
Yep.
then I'm willing to reinvest into this company. What am I going to do with it to make the cash flow more sustainable, predictable, and transferable? If
Yep.
there's anything that anybody takes away from this episode is like the more sustainable, predictable, and transferable your cash flow is, the more your company's worth because you've de-risked that cash flow and you've increased the value of the asset. So then the question is, what do you do with the $500,000? And I know that you do good work on helping people figuring out how the heck do you do that? We've got the finance side to say, hey, here's the realm of options of where you can spend your money. But then it's like,
Mhm.
how do you actually deploy that cash in an investment
Intelligently. Yeah.
intelligently? Right. Versus 99% of the people, including my dad and I, before we sold our company, it's literally what you thought was awesome. Go to a CEO peer group mastermind. You're like, that was awesome. What should we do? Or it's the person that stomps their feet the hardest during the executive team meetings or what you enjoy doing. Not like my dad and I were salespeople and we just neglected systems because that sucks. Like, why would we invest in something that gives us a headache? So it just
Yeah.
shifts that whole like shifting of the mindset, I think provides a framework to say, okay, now I know why I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I love how you unpacked all of that. And I kind of want to dive into a few of those pieces because you mentioned a few key things in America. Yes, in a capital focused entrepreneurship, no matter where you're at, if you work hard and if you're able to actually provide value to the marketplace, you will be rewarded. And I
Mhm.
think that's a key thing that we can't overlook. I think that's really important. The second piece there too is not every company is, like you mentioned, able to have that transferable cash flow. So I think it's also important to assess what kind of company you're at, what kind of company you're providing, or if you're like, for example, I'll be super transparent here. Like I realized through like series of lessons that some of my business is a practice, meaning I am the practitioner of it, and that's not very transferable at all. As a matter of fact, it's super non-transferable. But I think it's important to also look at, well, that plus what is that building? A good analogy is looking at media businesses. for example. A media business, like what does it do? It's not really investable. It's not ideal. I mean, if you right now it's June 8th, 2022. What happened to BuzzFeed? Their stock fell like 40%. So why? Because it's a media business. Like, what's the predictability for that? It's not, is that a really good type of business to invest
Does
in?
it actually have cash flow?
Yeah.
Like we're in the right. I love how you just genuinely laugh about this, Rob, because like I said to my business partner, because like all we're doing is looking at money. Every company has three financial statements, Apple down to the laundromat down the road. And I'm like, maybe somewhere in the relatively near future, like sanity will come back to people. Like someone has to make money somewhere, somehow, some way, because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. And 100%. And when you look at that too, okay, let's look at that case study of BuzzFeed. They created content, the listicles, the whole thing. What could they have built that's an actual asset that is tangible for the marketplace
Mhm,
using media as a front end?
mhm,
And I think, for example, for me as a practice, how can you build that into something else, either a software, a program, a training, a
mhm.
service, to be able to have that back end tangible asset? And I think that's important for us to look at in your business because you might see yourself, you're the sole practitioner. You might see yourself, how does this actually work? If you are in media or if you are an agency or if you are like a services firm, how do you, what you do produce an outcome of another asset or some sort of tangible asset?
I have a services company and a training company and a media company. Just and again, it was just me a few years ago. And then I
Yeah.
got my partner. And so our flywheel raw is we create timely, relevant, highly valuable free content that leads to
Mhm.
paid training. And then the paid training leads to fractional CFO services. And we're highly intimately involved in these companies. We know everything that's going on that allows us to anticipate the needs of clients, that allows us to create additional educational products and services, and then we take some of those material and then we create highly timely available relevant material to see how the market's reacting to that, to then create more paid training, and it just goes around like that in a flywheel. And the whole goal is, and there's another interesting kind of component to when you're talking about whatever a company has, whether it's even IP,
Mhm.
because I was doing this presentation a few weeks ago and there was a whole dialogue around IP, like IP that makes your company more worth it or more valuable if that IP protects your cash flow and you can monetize that IP and create cash flow.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just an idea. Like,
Exactly. I appreciate you saying that, and my heart goes out to all of our thought leaders out there.
I'll tell you what, until Spotify stopped checks to Joe Rogan, who was the other? It wasn't John Stewart, but it was someone else that just got paid. Was it Conan O'Brien? I think it was like
Eh,
$120 million that someone wrote for him. Yeah. It's like, how
those are
much?
still different media plays. That's a different level, right? If they were like, we're in the wrong business, not doing all the entertainment stuff. But
Yeah, exactly.
I think diving into that though, I think that's really important for us to do that. How did you create harmony and synchrony? Because I know that the flywheel, the way that you just explained it, the content to training and services makes a lot of sense. I've talked to entrepreneurs, as a matter of fact, like even in discovery sessions, like, hey, Raul, we have this services business. It's cranking, it's pumping. We just started this training services and it's like almost taking over our services business, and it's like conflicting interests. It's almost like conflicting minds. How, and maybe this is not like a one size fits all, but when it comes to prioritizing in a business, if it's a service or if it's a training, should we consider creating flywheels or just consider focusing on what you're more proficient in and scaling that for an exit or a tangible asset to reinvest in the future to another business?
Wonderful question. Because I sold a established business and created this one from the ground up, which way harder.
Yeah.
I highly recommend buying a company to use the infrastructure to grow it if you have the choice. My own perspective, I want everything that I do to compound on top of each other. I mean, like you'd mentioned Ray Dalio. I mean, the people that have like just they have the playbook there. And I want whether I'm talking to you, which I'm enjoying this, I'm going to be doing another podcast episode for me. I'm going to jump on some coaching calls. Like everything is self-reinforcing of what's going on
Mhm,
because we've identified our ideal client and the customer journey. So I
mhm.
did that first. So when we sat down and we did the story brand framework and we said, who is it that is the character? What do they want?
Yep.
And what are their internal, external, philosophical problems? And it's they want to create wealth, enjoy work, and make an impact. They've sacrificed a lot of money, time, effort, and all this, and they're not making the progress that they want to. People are telling them that they need more time at home. They've got all these things. They have decisions to make and they don't know the long term impact. Therefore, they need to create more value to have more choices. VC doesn't fit in there. Private
Yeah.
equity doesn't fit in there. And so for us, it was like, and man, I'm a sales guy. So it was like, I was trying to say yes to every single prospect, but it was distracting and absolutely not forward momentum at the
Mhm.
end of the day. Like at the end of the project or at the end of the potential engagement, I was like, man, that just absolutely took us off course where I want to be able to feel the momentum going in the right direction. I mean, Jeff Bezos said the number one thing that changed the trajectory of Amazon was doing the flywheel exercise with Jim Collins.
Yeah, that every Jim Collins book, if you're listening for our audience out there, like every one of those, like it's a must have to read.
Just staples, man. So you
Yeah.
got to do it.
No, that's key. And I think you're right in making sure that there's true alignment. And it, in my opinion, it always does go back to the customer journey because that enforces your front end marketing, your sales process, your fulfillment, your onboarding, your referral, and how do you create that cycle back? And it's so simple, but I think that is the premise to unlocking any question
Hmm.
in your business. We talked a little bit about, oh, you mentioned that it's easier to grow an existing company. And maybe this could be depending on like your the way that you operate as a founder, right? Like perhaps you're more able to build the systems versus being that creative that creates a ton of stuff but can't finish it. So I guess it also depends on self-awareness of
Yeah.
what works
What are
best.
you solving for? Because yeah, if you're a founder that likes to create an inventor and that might not enjoy the other, yeah. So it's what are you solving for is a great context before you jump in.
Before you jump into that. But I also like I saw this from Redpoint, like a VC firm, like 500 startup founders surveyed. I'll send you the link if you want, but the 2022 market conditions survey from May 30th, so just recent. There was an interesting point. There's 10 points. One of those points was around a lot of sentiment for founders just want to sell their company. So we might be seeing at this point really good companies at a really good discount at a good price. And I think it's important to also look at it might feel like it's outlandish to buy another company and grow it, but when you look at that versus a house or I mean, talk to us a little bit about that mindset.
I'm all in on it. Let's put it that way. And
Yeah.
so let's talk about the narrative that people have of why. So you said a lot of the founders want to sell. And by the way, I could go and this is from the US Census Bureau. I'll give more context. I can tell you're a context guy, which I love. Is so there are 27 million privately held entities in the US. 21 million of them are solopreneurs, no employees.
Mhm.
6 million have privately held companies have employees. They employ 160 million Americans. There's only 20,000 over 100 million in revenue,
Wow.
and they employ 60 million Americans. There's between 5 million in revenue and 100 million in revenue. There are 300, roughly a little over 300,000. They employ 30 million. And then there's 5.6 million companies that are under 5 million in revenue and they employ 30 million, some ish employees.
Mhm.
The average age is 62, like major problem.
Wow.
So there, every day I'm like, Ryan, I'm just tired. It's because you have a job. I've never
Yeah,
heard
they're
anybody
getting
like, yeah, they're just like, of course. You have no, you're so sick of having this $5 million revenue job that
mhm.
has got all the stress, all the personal guarantees, and you haven't built a machine that's transferable. So of course you're tired. And people call me and they go, Ryan, I want out. I'm like, out of what? Your job or your asset? I've never had anybody call me like, Ryan, I'm really sick of the $1 million coupon mailbox money
Yep.
because you would be. And this gets to your question, which is buy versus build and why and how, like, so even my company going from 0 to we have now 10 employees and a pretty hefty payroll with the company or the employees that we have. I have capacity planning to say, if this is the essentially budgeting turns, if you budget the right way
Mhm.
on your income statement, month by month by month of what services you're going to sell and what margins and how that translates into all three statements into your cash flow, you can say, if I do these things for sales at these margins, this is what the results in cash at the end of every month. This is when I can hire these people.
Mhm.
Most people they get to the point where they get $2-3 million in revenue. Like I'm finally making 100K. And then I say, why don't you just hire that next CEO to work yourself out of the business? You're like, well, cash flow. And there's
Yeah.
no plan to get on top of the cash flow. Like you mentioned with Dalio, there's just this perpetual hamster
It's
wheel
like, yeah.
instead of getting on top of that. So I think if you're a startup and you have a
Mhm.
plan like that allows you to see into the future using all three financial statements, you don't have to be that tired because you just build the plan and you work the plan like a son of a gun.
Yeah.
The other thing is so I think it's possible in the startup world, but also if you buy a company, you're immediately on top of the cash flow. And you could,
Exactly.
and again, this is where depending on the size company that you buy, you get a little bit lower than the 500 grand in cash flow, depending on how much equity you put down and how much debt service you have. You might not be able to afford to hire the GM. or reinvest in the company. And I'm seeing
Yeah.
a lot of people that did the walk or die buy then build with the 10% down with SBA loans right now.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they went from carrying no inventory to now 300 grand. Labor is going up 30% and they're completely pinched because they've got no cash flow because they're servicing so much debt.
Yeah.
So it's a big wrapper of it depends. But
Yeah.
like the answers are still the same as build the plan forward and make your
Exactly.
decision according.
Yeah, and I appreciate you brought that up because that was gonna be my second question around. Yeah, there's a lot of sentiment right now. Hey, there's like you mentioned, the boomers retiring from their businesses. It's a huge wealth transfer of exactly what you mentioned. The businesses at the same time, the other trend of builders have like growing their businesses. It started from zero, which is significantly harder. But then also that creates the question, it begs the question, how do we do debt financing here? But you also have to keep in mind that advertising, marketing, sales, the
Cost
inventory that you
money.
do have hard, everything costs a lot of money. So you got to figure out how to really grow that. Man, I feel like we can talk about pretty much any market condition at this point and dive deep. But when it comes to looking like a chessboard in regards to where we're at with not just the economy, and I know right now it's a phase, right? But as we work that plan as founders or with your consulting clients and you're reviewing your next best moves, is it just as simple as looking at your cash, like your three financial statements and being able to assess what's the best strategic move for you? Or like what else would you add to the table as you analyze strategy, marketing conditions, and then business analysis?
I love how you just phrase that up. Man, just before I even give you my answer, I need to preface it that my dad and I had a copier business. We turned it around and sold it for a bunch of money back in 2014. So I went through 6 years of a turnaround. So been through hell and high water.
Yep.
And then also financial accounting was my worst grade in college, yet now I teach it to entrepreneurs and
Yeah.
advisors. So is the universe is just like laughing at me. My partner is like, I turned around into an accountant and this doesn't have to be complicated. That's why I say that. I just get a
Mhm.
little bit of, hey, yes, finance is intimidating and my past proves it, but it doesn't have to be complicated. A lot of this jargon and all this BS that people spew at you, like the reality is all of the answers are in the numbers. They all are. Like all three statements are a three-dimensional. When you tie them all together, it's a three-dimensional view of your company. If you project all those forward, and out of hundreds of people that have been through our training, thousands of conversations, I can count on like maybe two hands how many people use all three statements to project them forward.
Mhm.
And when you do, you can literally see everything. So like you
Mhm.
have all three of them, your income statement. I can just give it a little bit of an overview how they interplay, but your income statement is you got sales. And if you sell something, if you have receivables, the receivable goes on your balance sheet as an
Yep.
asset. If you buy stuff that's a cost of goods, it then goes into on your balance sheet as a liability. That's how they play together. And then the cash flow statement is just a mathematical change in the balance sheet over one period of time between May 1st and June 1st
Mhm.
or May 30th and June 30th. Did cash go up or down? Did receivables go up or down? Did payables go up or down? And you're just seeing like how much cash am I going to have at the end of the month? You can't do it unless you tie all three of those together. So how would you know what you can afford
Exactly.
if you don't do that? And then once you have that visibility, like we have a steel fabricator, once they've figured this all out after engaging with us, they're reselling their steel at 40% below their costs. If we ran a scenario forward and said, hey, we're having a hard time hiring people, what if we increased everybody's pay by 25%, paid for all healthcare, and did their matching of the 401k? What would that do? I don't know, but want to know the answer, right? Or what
Yeah.
if we increased prices or did that? All of the ideas and questions people have, the answers are in the three statements. And the one statement that's another big takeaway, it's on the cash flow statement. It's net cash flow provided by operating activities. Every professional investor, private equity firm, or anybody that knows what they're doing, before they're looking at anything to say, send me over your financials, that's what they're going to look for. If they don't have that, they're going to rebuild all three statements to find. That's how important it is.
No, 100%. And I think we probably should say for another episode to talk about adding to the value of the business because if that number isn't low, is not what the ideal founder wants to have. There's strategies to really focus on how do you bundle, how do you package, how do you
Mhm.
restructure things in order to have more value there. But I think the first step really is to understand where we're at, understand where we're going, and understand how to read the numbers in assessing the next
Get on that
strategic
scale.
steps.
Get
Yeah.
on the scale.
But hey, the goal is always there's an intention in mind. It's not just
The-
accidentally stepping on the scale.
Accident. And by the way, just to loop back to the analogy, accidentally stepping on the scale is entertaining an out of the blue offer, having none of this work done.
Yeah. No. I appreciate that. Well, Ryan, for all of our listeners out there, what's the best place for people to, one, thank you for this episode, and two, learn more about you, maybe even get some of the frameworks?
Our website's got everything on it, arcona.io.
Okay.
And we've got a bunch of videos on the 5 principles. And then we have a financial assessment that's got 22 questions. You don't need your financials or anything on. It's just kind of essentially assessing you on the structure, how you organize your financials and the 3 statements. And on the results page, there's 5 videos of my partner and I showing what good looks like. So like seeing, okay, how does this all work? But everything's on the website.
Cool. We'll put those links in the show notes. Ryan, thank you again, man.
This has been a blast. Yeah, I appreciate the questions and it was a lot of fun.
If you found value in today's podcast, please consider sharing this with someone that you believe could also benefit from this episode. You never know, you may be the catalyst that opens them up to a new way of operating their business and experiencing life. As always, it's an honor to be a small part of your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.